Cool. Righty ho, we're good to go. Hey Mubs, how you doing?
Good, Tom. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you very much. Good to see everybody joining. Hope everyone's doing well. What we'll do, we'll just give it like a few minutes to let people come and join, but hopefully you can hear and see us okay. If you can't, let us know, but I'm going to presume you can rather than the other way around. If you want to type anything in chat or ask any questions, make sure you change the setting in the chat box to all panelists and attendees if you want other people to see the chat. I've been on ones before where I've just sent messages like to nobody's seen them, so learn from mistakes. But yeah, today we're joined by Mubs. This is Mubs, who is a judge on the Makerpad challenge, which is going on at the moment, which hopefully all of you are involved in. And we're going to be diving into basically how Mubs operates. 2 seconds. Okay, I'm turning up my volume, Cleve. Hopefully that's a bit better. How Mubs operates and how he ships so many products, because I think he is a serial maker. How many projects or products have you shipped so far, Mubs, do you reckon?
Um, yeah, I guess this is a tricky one to count because I wasn't really counting at the beginning, really. But it's getting close to 100 side projects over the years. It's not quite there yet, but it's almost there.
Amazing. Love it. Is the sound all right, Cleve? Does it sound a bit better? Let me know if not. And then what we'll do, we'll just wait a couple more minutes, then we'll do like a proper introduction and we'll get going. Yeah, if you've got any questions for Mubs while we talk about anything, pop them in the Q&A and I'll ask them to him at a suitable spot. Cool. So who here is, let us know if you actually rolled up in the Makerpad challenge, and also let us know what you're making as well. What projects are you building? If you've got any links that you want to share, pop them in the chat and we might spend a visit. Making a mess. Nice, Cleve. That's what we like to see.
That's the best way to start, and then you clean it up, and you have this polished thing at the end. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Right, Mubs, let's get going. Would you care to give a proper introduction to yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for calling in. I have been making things since I was about 8 years old. Started just messing around with the computer that we had in our living room that the family shared. I pretty much monopolized it, I guess, at that point, and was kind of on it all the time, playing video games and then just kind of writing my own stuff. And so I just really got interested in it from a really young age. Went to university for software engineering, computer science. Graduated from university and then went into the startup world. And so ever since then, it's been 24 years since I graduated. But I've been working on websites and web applications and kind of stuff like that ever since. Really took an interest in, obviously, because I had a passion about it prior to actually it being a paid thing. I still enjoy like working on stuff during the day for doing client work and doing for paid work, but then making things is kind of also my hobby as well. So that's why I think people are always like a little bit shocked that obviously made a lot of things, but of the 60 or 70 products that are listed on Producthunt, the vast majority of those, I'd say like 85%, have been stuff that I've done in like weekends and evenings.
Yeah, that's the bit that kind of shocked me, because if I look at all the products you've got, you kind of presume that you're working on them full time and like nothing else, and they're just like your core source of income. But you do actually do lots of other stuff like during the day, which you consider like a day job, which is remarkable. So yeah, hopefully this challenge gets people into the swing of building and publishing products, and then maybe we've got like another Mubs somewhere in there. That's
Excellent.
awesome. So first topic I wanted to cover is one that hopefully some people are kind of tackling at the first stage of this challenge, and that's like finding the right problem to work on. Because I know uniquely no code kind of throws up its own unique challenge where actually building things isn't necessarily the hardest bit, but actually like picking the right thing to work on is particularly challenging. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean the thing that I try and do, and I think the thing that I consider more than I think a lot of other people do, especially when they're kind of starting out, is what I guess what they call makeup product fit rather than product market fit, which a lot of people are concerned about. Like, is the product the right thing to build for the people that you're trying to target, and are you building the right solution for them and all that kind of stuff? It's all super important stuff. But for me, it's kind of always been a question of, am I the right person to build that thing as well? Which I think a lot of people skip out on. And that's why I think a lot of people get halfway through a project and then they just kind of lose steam on it, and then they lose interest, and so all that kind of stuff. And then that's why a lot of people start a lot of projects, but they don't actually ship a lot of projects because they've kind of picked the wrong thing to kind of start with there. So I think finding makeup product fit is first, and then finding product market fit kind of comes afterwards. And that, for me, with a lot of the sort of projects that I've built over the years, it's just been things that I'm interested in, right? So I think one of the first side projects that I built was, so this is going back, probably back to like 2000, maybe 2001, was I'm a big Premier League fan, a big English football fan. And back in 2000, online there still wasn't a lot of easy ways to kind of track, what the results of matches were, and kind of who scored what and who's winning the league, and sort of all those kind of things. So one of the first things I built was just kind of a kind of an easy way for me to track exactly all those things, like who's winning for most games, who's in the lead, what's the most recent scores, what's the upcoming matches, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, I built it because there wasn't any other way to kind of find that information kind of online at the time. And it was something I was really interested in. And so I was able to kind of find the energy to kind of work on it, because I think that's usually where people struggle is, right? Because just kind of like you mentioned, most people like myself have a job that we do, whether it's freelance or a paid job for somebody. You come home at the end of the day and you're really tired from having worked 8-hour days or even longer sometimes, and the last thing you want to do is open up your laptop and start working on stuff, because it still feels like work.
Absolutely.
But yeah, picking a product that you're really passionate about outside of work, because I wasn't working on kind of sporting sites kind of at the time. I was working on a financial streaming application kind of at the time, so it was completely opposite of what I was doing. So I would come home and be like, I wonder what the score was, I wonder who played and all that kind of stuff. And so you just kind of had that kind of energy to kind of help me kind of work on things as well. So
Nice.
I think that's kind of one of the first important things is, pick the things that you're interested in, pick the things that you're passionate about, because it'll help you find the energy to kind of actually work on it. Yeah, it might be cool to say I'm going to solve world hunger, but if you're not into food and you're not into
Yeah.
sort of into those kind of things, it's going to be very hard to solve that particular problem.
Yeah,
Um,
and also
yeah,
just to like add to that, we see it where you can maybe two people identify like the same problem and then go around it, like trying to solve it different ways. One person has actually like an interest and like a passion around that like topic area, and the other person that just has the ability to build it. Like you'll always lose out to the person who has like the passion, who's willing to like go the distance with it, rather than somebody who's just like going to flash in the pan and they might get something up and out, but you're always going to be beaten by the other person. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I think the sort of other thing that helps solve is because right now, if you started on something that you had been watching, if let's say it's TV shows or movies and things like that, let's say that's an interest as well. If you know the industry really well because you've just been a part of it, because you watch movies, because you do movie reviews, you follow all the actors and all that kind of stuff, it saves so much time in terms of you trying to figure out what the market is and kind of what are the different pieces inside of that market that you have to then turn into parts of your application as well, without necessarily having to go and talk to lots of people and do lots of customer research and do all those things to actually figure out
Mm.
what are the problems that people are having, what's the things that that you have to model inside of inside your applications and things. If you have that passion already for that industry and that thing that you're trying to solve, it kind of saves so much time because you don't have to spend hours on the phone talking to people to kind of extract all of that information out as well.
Got it. Yeah, I suppose it's like a bit of a comparison to like the rocket internet model where they just say, "Oh, look, this seems popular. Let's like spin up our own version of it." And yeah, I think there's like a really high percentage of those companies that don't work. Obviously, they'll hit on one like now and again, but they'll always kind of a large majority of the time lose out to the best people in that given niche, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it just means that you're more likely to stick around. I'm like, kind of everybody wants to be that overnight success, right? Like they want to launch their product and be used and be seen everywhere. But the reality is that you'll launch it and a sort of handful of people check it out, and then but if you keep it up, if you keep if you keep adding features, if you keep adding content, kind of eventually you'll kind of get the traction that you're looking for. But if you don't have the passion for what you're actually working on, if you don't get that initial like huge surge of interest, chances are that you'll kind of lose interest pretty quickly after that.
Okay, so we've got obviously the Makerpad challenge going on at the moment. There's people here who have entered it and are building projects. So still in kind of the first week or so, first like 8 days. If somebody, let's say you are approaching this, I don't know if you are, maybe actually in the process of building something,
I can't be as a
as a judge.
judge, I
Yeah.
don't think.
If you had 30 days and maybe you started off and you're saying, right, I'm going to build this thing. I've always wanted to do it. I think this is a good idea. I know how to build it. You're out the blocks flying first few days, you get something together and you have a day where you're just like, oh, I think I'm fed up with it already. Well, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool to like think about how you feel about things, not just think about trying to push over the sort of line, the sort of finish line and things like that. It's okay to kind of reevaluate things as well, because I think there's probably two or three things I think about in terms of evaluating a project, right? Like one is, can I even do this, right? Like, is it possible with the information that I have, with the access to the things that I need to actually build the thing? Like, because there's just some information that you can't get in like some kind of automated way, and it's very manual thing that you have to go fetch those things and all that kind of stuff. So it can be like, yes, it can be built, but it would be really, really, really hard to kind of scale it up and do kind of all the things that you need to actually build the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think about, okay, once I've finished that initial build, how much time and effort is it going to take to keep that up, right? So something like a blog or something like that is fairly easy to build, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of content management systems out there that kind of just like WordPress and all those things that will help you build a blog. So building the blog isn't really that hard. Obviously, choosing a content for the blog and then updating it every day is the hard bit, in terms of like you have to come up with ideas and you have to figure all that kind of stuff out. So
Yeah.
the sort of upfront work is not that big, but the work to maintain it is really hard and really long. And that's the kind of things that it can be like, you can, after a week or so, you can sit down with an idea and be like, I think I've exhausted it. Like I've written everything I can write about this thing already. I don't know what else to write about, and it can happen sometimes if you niche down a little bit too far. You can be like, okay, yeah, there's nowhere else to head kind of in this particular space. And so it's okay to sit back and say, is there something else I can do here? Can I expand the niche here a little bit so I have some more stuff to write about, or can I refocus it so that you find other things to kind of work on as well? Or maybe you've kind of niched down, you've written as much content as you can. Maybe there's some other kind of feature or some other application that you could build that you hadn't really planned on kind of working on, but it might be a feature that you can add to your site, one that will kind of give you that little kind of burst of energy as well, because you can continue to add new things, but then also have something that your audience can kind of look at as well and say, oh, that's an interesting thing, even if it's not kind of what you had originally planned as well.
Got it. So if there's anybody here listening, is there anybody in that situation where you've kind of gone out of the gates flying with an idea and then you're starting to kind of doubt if you're going to actually get through to the end? That's you. Let us know. That's really a good segue on the blog side of things to a post you posted on your Medium back in I think it's 2018. So I noticed you've actually started posting more recently on Medium as well. We talk about like how ideas are everything. Do you want to touch on kind of your thinking behind this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I wrote this as a bit of a devil's advocate, as a bit of a counterpoint, because I was seeing a lot of articles that basically said ideas are worthless and execution is everything, and it doesn't matter what you do as long as you just pick something and just work on it for long enough, eventually it will become a success. And I was like, well, that's a bit stupid. Obviously ideas are important, because if ideas weren't important, then everybody would be making lots of money, because everybody would just be working on stuff and everybody would be successful and stuff like that. So I was like, so I started thinking about a little bit more about, okay, so what is it about ideas that really why are ideas important? And it comes back, I think, a lot to just kind of some things that we've already touched on, in terms of ideas are the things that give you energy, right? So if just like I mentioned, if I've come home from like 8-hour day at work, if I'm working on an idea that I'm not passionate about, that I'm not interested in, I'll find excuses. I'll find reasons not to work on that side project, on that challenge hackathon thing that I'm working on, and I'll just I'll watch TV, or I'll just go hang out with some friends or whatever, which is okay too. It's okay to hang out with friends. But if you have this idea that you're really interested in and you're really excited about, you'll sit down and you won't watch whatever's on TV or whatever, and that idea that you're trying to execute on, that idea that you're trying to bring to life, will give you the energy to actually push through and actually work on something, and actually hopefully ship something as well. Because I think that, and then obviously having a good idea is, I think ultimately, it's not that ideas are worthless. It's not that ideas are everything. There's somewhere in the middle, in terms of you're gonna have an idea that's good, and you're gonna execute on it well, and it'll do well. If you have a bad idea, you execute it really, really well, it'll still be a bad idea, and it probably won't do well, but you'll probably still be able to launch something because you'll execute really well. But if you have a really good idea and you execute it really well, then obviously you're gonna head off. But just saying that you can work on anything and that ideas aren't really that kind of important, I think is kind of awful way to go look at things as well. So that's kind of where I kind of started with that specific article, I think.
Got it. And how, if you say you've got an idea that you're going to run with, how do you kind of weigh up the competition? Do you do that prior to starting the project, or do you just basically say, I think this is a good idea, I want to build it, I'm going to start building it? Or would you kind of go out there and start weighing things up?
I would say, look, it depends, right? Like, it depends on why are you building this thing, right? Like, if you're building a project just to have some fun because you've got an idea that you want to execute on, that you want to see this thing out there exist with your specific point of view, your perspective of why it should exist and what it's going to do, all that kind of stuff, then just go ahead and start, right? Like, just start, and you can build it, and you can make it do exactly what you want it to do. Doesn't matter what else is out there. And that's absolutely fine too. If on the other hand you're like thinking about, well, I'd love to do this thing on the side at the beginning, and I'd love it to turn into a side hustle. I love to turn into something I do whole time, every day. Then I think it's worth time to kind of evaluate, is this a viable business? Is this something that people will pay for? If it's something that's viable, are there other people already offering similar things? How much are they charging? Is there a competition? Is there a market there that I can kind of participate in as well? Is there something I can bring to it that's not there already? So yeah, I think it depends a little bit on kind of why you're launching things, as opposed to just kind of saying always one way or the other. Now, in terms of how I do that, I mean, it's got a lot easier, I think, over the years. Like sites like Producthunt and things like that make it easier to kind of find products that exist. So if you have an idea, one of the first things you can do is just head over to something like Producthunt and just kind of do a quick search for the thing that what's the main feature that you're going to implement. If you do a search on that and you find 500 other products that do the same thing, then you have to kind of rethink about, okay, how is my thing kind of stand out from everything else that's out there as well. So I mean, it's got much easier to kind of find if things exist. Obviously, even just doing a Google search as well is kind of helpful as well. Producthunt is good because it also shows you the level of interest that other people have in it, right? Like if you have an idea for something and you search for it on Producthunt and it's got 500 upvotes, chances are it's something that a lot of people are kind of interested in. If you find it and there's like 3 or 4 upvotes, then chances are you might be barking down the wrong alley in terms of, so other people have tried to build something similar and not had a lot of interest.
Got it. Yeah. So just for those who kind of aren't familiar with Producthunt, let's just bring it up quickly so you can see it. So yeah, actually, Mubs, why don't you explain? You've shipped over 70 products. What is Producthunt?
Yeah, so Producthunt has been around for about 4 or 5 years now, and it's basically a daily leaderboard for new products that have just been launched or recently been discovered by the Producthunt community. Every day, people find new products, they launch new products, they submit them onto Producthunt, and they appear on the homepage or not. Sometimes it depends on who kind of hunts them, is kind of what they call it. And then once they're on the homepage, people can check them out, and then they upvote them. And obviously, the more upvotes and things that you have, the sort of higher up the homepage you will be. People spend some time in the discussions as well, just in terms of sharing why they built products and kind of people also respond to kind of what they think of the idea and sort of all that kind of stuff as well. And like I said, it's a really good way it's not the only way, it's not 100% foolproof, but it's kind of good way to see what people think of existing products as well. So like I said, I do use it as a way to see if kind of stuff exists out there already, and then also just to kind of get a sense of, do people like the general idea about what the product is.
Okay. How would you consider, what's the benchmark for, say, a good idea and a not good? Obviously 0 is not good, but what's that kind of threshold? Because I think you've launched more than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit. I mean, you kind of have to consider who your audience is for your particular product. Like they may not hang out a lot on Producthunt, so what might be good for one kind of product might not be the same for a different kind of product as well. So I think you have to consider that a little bit. But in general, if you can make it to the top 5 on any given day on Producthunt, then chances are it's an idea that enough people have an interest in that it's worth pursuing. Now that can be anything from 100 upvotes to 300 upvotes on any given day, depending on if you launch on the week. If it appeared on the homepage on a weekend, if it appeared on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, which are typically the most traffic days on Producthunt as well. So, I mean, anything less than like 20 or 30 votes is probably either there just wasn't a market for it on Producthunt, or if it was just an idea that people weren't that that interested in.
Yeah, I know actually Ben wrote a blog post ages ago of how to launch on Producthunt. I think that's like still a common question he gets today about like when's the best time to launch it, etc., etc. So there is a bit of an art to it, as I understand. One thing that kind of segues onto is actually like having side projects which are alive, dead, or as you put it on your site I worked on,
Zombie.
zombie or automated.
Yes.
Should we touch on some of those, and I'll just share my screen just to show what
Yeah.
I'm referencing here.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, when it's somebody like myself who's launched a lot of things, you can't really actively work on that many projects at the same time. Yeah, I can probably do more than a lot of people just because of, like I said, it's my hobby as well as kind of what I get paid to do. So active is just stuff that I'm still actively working on, still making updates to, making features, adding content if it's that kind of site. You'll see there's kind of autopilot in there. And so autopilot is stuff that doesn't typically require any active involvement every day. So like Indie Hackers TV, for example, was a site that I built fairly recently that kind of looks at what was posted on indiehackers.com and figures out which of those posts have YouTube links in them, because I like to watch YouTube videos on lots of different topics and things. And because it's all kind of automated, it just kind of like there's some scripts that run that pull the content from indiehackers.com, figures out what the YouTube links are, updates the website automatically. It just runs by itself as long as the scripts keep running, and there's no reason that scripts will stop working that I can think of. The site will just continue to update itself, and it will just kind of pull in new content kind of automatically. So I don't have to worry about those. And then
just to hop in, sorry, that's something also that you can now do without needing to code. So obviously we can now, as like non-technical people sitting in this room, like me, we can do this sort of thing with tools like Zapier and Integromat, etc., etc. So this is almost something that was reserved for those who could code, being able to like dynamically update sites, but now it's kind of spilled over to us non-technical folks. So that's quite a cool thing.
Yeah, I think that's been, I think, one of the most interesting trends in the NoCode space. I mean, because to some degree, NoCode had kind of existed for a really long time, but you were kind of restricted to what kind of site that you could build with it because of what features and functionality were kind of available to you. With things, even with sites like Bubble and sort of those kind of things now, I think it's meant that you can work on a lot other things as well, without having to write any code. But it can still feel like it's a live dynamic site without you having to without you having to actually write any code as well. So I think that's really important as well.
Got it. So we've got a few here that is sold. We've talked about autopilot. We've got a few that are sold, which is always good to see.
Yep.
When do they come out of the blue? Because obviously you've been doing this for a while. Does someone like pop up like just randomly and say, I'd like to buy this site off you? Do you get offers all the time? How does that work?
I get offers fairly often. Mostly it's just because I'm around the space. I'm kind of around the industry, and people know me from the communities as well. So I don't typically actively market any of my things in terms of sites that that I'm looking to sell usually. Just because most of these are kind of fun, passion kind of projects. I build them because I want to see them exist. So I don't really think about like I'm going to build this and then I'm going to try and sell it in a few months or anything like that. But just because I'm out there and I have obviously things like I worked on which list all of my things, people see them and like, oh, he's got he's got 60 other things he's working on. Maybe he would like to sell this particular one to me instead.
Got it. And when does a project die in your eyes? Because it's, as somebody who can automate stuff, what
Yeah.
qualifies as a dead project?
So some of those are just stuff that stopped working after after enough time. Like I think there was one that was Top Shots. I think was one that I built a few years back, which kind of used the Terrible API to kind of that top nine kind of thing,
Mhm.
where you kind of choose your top 9 posts of the year, and we kind of automatically built kind of what your top 9 was. The Terrible API changed after a while, and we couldn't build the thing that we were building with it
Got it.
anymore. So rather than try and keep the site up, I just like, okay, it's not going to work anymore, so it's not going to work anymore. So I just kind of killed that off.
Yep.
You basically just take the
Force your
site
hand.
offline at that point. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, so usually when it comes to these kind of projects, I try and leave them off as long as I can, even if I'm not actively working on them, just to kind of show people what's possible,
Hmm.
and kind of stuff like that. I guess the other one that's the zombie kind is the ones that you can't really fully automate, and but they because it requires content. Like for example, it could be something where you started a blog, and then after a while you just lose interest in that particular topic or niche or whatever, and you
Hmm.
just stop adding
So you
new
kill it.
content to it. But you want to leave the site up because it's archived content that might still be interesting to kind of people. So it's not dead because it's still up and available, not active because you're not adding new content to it. So it's kind of in this zombie state that it still lives out there, but it's not being fed by anybody.
Yep.
But it's still there.
Got it. Understood. We've got a couple of comments from Cleve, which you can dive into. When we were on the subject of Producthunt, he said, a big problem for me is I've worked in a team of genius developers, front end, back end, full stack. The last team in particular are truly geniuses, but as I lean into this world, the thought of trying to find those guys with that skill set, frankly, fear the heck out of me. Okay. So it's like, do you mean about like going up against people who are building software as like as a maker yourself, Cleve?
I'll just add right there is that, well, one, I don't worry about that too much, and because one of the things I love about working on the side and kind of working kind of in the union stuff is I get to do all of that. Like I get to do the front end, I get to do the back end, I get to do the design, I get to do all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working for stuff during the day, I typically have a very specific focus on what I'm doing because I'm kind of officially I'm a back end engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So I do all of this stuff on the servers and I do all of that stuff, and it's great. I mean, I love what I do, and I get to work with lots of really smart people as well. But I like having the control of being able to do whatever I want to do, being able to make it look however I want it to look and use whatever framework I want to use on the front end as well, and all those kind of things as well. That's where I've used a lot of the sort of time I've done kind of where I've done side projects is to kind of experiment with a lot of those new tools and new SDKs and libraries and things. And even if there's a new tool that you haven't used, and you're like, well, it'd be fun to try it in like a real project, and rather than just like trying to introduce it to client work straight
Mm-hmm.
away. But you just get to try it out in like a fun little side project that that has no real schedule for or kind of anything like that. So so use that time to kind of expand your skill set as well. So I think that's where I went from being a back end developer to being a full stacker, just because of the things that I was doing in kind of weekends and evenings as well.
Yeah, gotcha. The one thing I wanted to ask on when you were saying about like trying different tools and trying different libraries, and I guess it kind of flips over from traditional programming, is how do you stay focused on a project using, say, like you've gone on the path using one library, but then like something fancy comes out? How do you deal with like shiny object syndrome, as it's obviously going to be relevant in traditional programming, but even more so in like the no code space. People are starting out, it seems. How do you battle that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, it goes back a little bit in terms of like, why are you building this thing, right? Like, as in some cases, like I specifically build things to learn something shiny and new. And so you kind of, okay, you're going to limit what you're building so that you can try this new thing out. I think that's a good way to think about things in terms of, you know, specifically, I'm going to work for a week or two. I'm going to try this new thing out. It's going to be awesome. But then again, if you're building something for, you know, for the longer term, I say, you know, sort of in those cases, it literally is, I'm going to use the tools that I already know. I'm not going to try anything new. I'm going to try anything because I don't want to hit obstacles that I don't know what the answer will be. Like if I'm building something with a tool that I've worked with past, you know, worked with an SDK or a library, things like that I've worked with in the past, or if it's an API or whatever, you know, I know all of the edge cases already in terms of some of the things that I might hit and some of the obstacles that I might face. And if something new comes along, you know, it's really tempting to say, oh, I'm just going to try it because it's got this one feature that I really want to play with and try out. But you know, those things, you just have to remind yourselves that those things never go as smoothly and as easily as you think they will, in terms of having those, you know, in terms of integrating with that one thing, because you'll start to hit those edge cases that you never hit before. So it's like, how do I solve this? And it's something new, so there'll probably be less help out there as well, in terms of, let's say you hit a problem that you haven't personally hit before, and it's a new tool. There's less people out there who are working on it. There's people who shared
Absolutely.
what they've been working on it with as well. And so trying to find the solution just becomes much harder because you kind of have to figure it out yourself now, versus something that's been out there for, you know, 2 or 3 years now. There's lots of stuff on Stack Overflow. There's lots of stuff, you know, sort of out there on people's blogs and things like that, that they've been experimenting with it and they've been trying these things. And yeah, people are awesome on the internet. If, you know, people share a lot of what they learn and stuff. And so yeah, so you being able to solve the problems that you hit becomes much easier with something that's kind of out there, that kind of exists for a long time as well. I mean, I know, I mean, personally, I've been a PHP developer now. I wrote my first bit of PHP in 1998. I think I wrote my first bit of PHP.
Wow.
And it was, after a while, it became very uncool to write PHP because people were going to Python and Ruby on Rails and, you know, so all those other things. And which I've used all those things as well over the years, but I'm still way more productive in PHP because of the long experience that I have with it. And so that's also one of the reasons I'm able to ship a lot of things, is that, you know, I've got this experience that I know how to do things. I know how things work. So if I have an idea, I don't have to think about how am I going to architect the application, how am I going to architect the solution, because it's all stuff I've already got lots of experience with.
Yeah.
If I was going to be using a new framework, a new library, I'd have to start thinking about, okay, how do I organize the project? Where do I put the files and all that kind of stuff that I don't have to spend any time and energy on.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Makes complete sense. There's a lot of that kind of two problems that come up, especially in related to the no code space, is one, just the cadence of new tools coming out that are not completely unique in their functionality, but marginally better in a couple of areas than a previous tool that already exists. So you often get the case where people are like, oh, this is like this, but it can do this as well. So
Yeah.
then people like jump ship and then realize like the support isn't as good, and then it kind of like bugs out, and then they're working on some new features, and then they're kind of like stuck between two places, and they're, oh, I should have stayed with the first one. So yeah, there's that issue. And also with tools being newer in general, there's always like the less feature complete, etc. So
Yeah, I think that's where you have to really consider, like, that one feature that you're really thinking about, how important is it to the solution that you're trying to build, right? Like, if it's going to make or break the thing that you want to build, then absolutely. I mean, then you kind of have to make that, your hand is kind of forced at
yeah,
that point, and you kind of have to experiment with it and see. But then, you just have to be a little bit more realistic in terms of your scheduling as well. Like, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to be something you can make in a weekend anymore. and it's something that you're like, okay, this is going to take me a few weeks now. I'm going to have to spend some time and actually learn the new tool as well as make the thing. And yeah, I think, you know, I think that's the other thing that I think a lot of people kind of lose sight of, I think, is just that expectation and just managing not what you're telling other people, but just your kind of internal expectations of how long things will take.
Yeah.
It's very easy to kind of look at people like me who've been doing this for like 20 odd years, who've got lots of experience with these things, and say, oh, he can launch stuff in a weekend, I can do it too. I can tell you when I first started, it didn't take me a weekend to build stuff. You know, I was working on, you know, like weeks and months on things just to kind of launch them out. And now, obviously, you know, now that I've got all the experience I've got, and you know, and I've accumulated all the skills over the years as well, yeah, I'm able to launch things in a few hours. But it took me 20 years to get to this point as well.
Absolutely. Gino said in the chat, Mubs, earlier you said that when you're building for fun, aka for yourself, you can do whatever you want in terms of products and features. However, regarding building for a specific market, do you maybe have one or two examples of what you've built and what you did to answer these first questions on market, problem, solution, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, usually those are the ones that I build with other people. So, for example, I worked with one of the first things I launched on Product, not the first things, but one of the earlier things I built on Producthunt and launched on Producthunt, I should say, is where I built this thing called Marketing Stash on with Ben, who's the founder of Makerpad. And that was one of those things where it was like, well, this is one of those stash sites that was quite popular back then. But it was understanding, okay, what is going to make this one kind of stand out from kind of what's out there. And obviously Ben had this, you know, this idea about building something that's specifically for marketers. And so we started thinking about, you know, what does that tool look like? What's the audience like for it? What's the kind of things that they would want to be able to see? And you know, how does the site change slightly because now you're targeting a slightly different audience base, and what's the kind of features and functionality that they're looking for, rather than kind of what kind of exists out there as well. So when we build Marketing Stash, it was very simple. You know, you kind of add resources, and yeah, we kind of showed them to users, but we did think a lot about, you know, how is somebody who's a marketer going to interact with the website, and how are they going to navigate the site that isn't the same as all the other stashes that were out there already. I think there were, you know, I think the first one was that startup stash that went kind of nuts, and then there was a whole slew of them after that. And so yeah, so that was one of those ideas where it's like, well, Startup Stash is cool, but let's refocus the market a little bit. Let's think about who is the right person to build this. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the right person to kind of work on that because I didn't know marketing that well. Obviously, Ben knew marketing a lot better than I did, and so we kind of joined forces on that, and just tried to understand kind of what the market looked like, and kind of move forward kind of with that.
Got it.
Another example, so I built Q with some parentheses. That's QUUU.co.
Mr. Kemp, Mr. Spur.
Yeah, with Daniel Kemp and Matthew Spur was the other co-founder that we had. And so that was a tool for basically just doing social media marketing, just a way to find content that you were interested in. And so when we first started thinking about this particular product, we were trying to think about this is kind of a two-headed marketplace. So we kind of had that problem to kind of fight with as well, right? In terms of you have to find the content that people want to share on social media. And then you have to think about who's the people who actually be posting on their accounts on social media as well. And so we really did a deep dive on kind of how people were using social media, why people weren't using social media, try to understand that space really well. And that was something that Matt and Dan really knew really well. And you know, I obviously knew the technical side of things of how to make it all happen. I was and still am a very active user on Twitter, so I had my own experiences as well, just to kind of bring to the table there as well. And so yeah, so that was another one where we really like tried to think about what's the market, who are the users, what kind of features are they looking for, why aren't they happy with the sort of tools that existed already, and kind of how is Q going to stand out from what's out there as well.
Got it. And let's move on to just some questions around like product building in general. So let's say we're going to have people who are probably in the process of actually building out their product. How would you go through the process of like building a new project? So like you've got an idea, you've got it like mapped out, maybe it's on the back of a napkin, maybe it's in like a formalized document, and then you start like researching your tools. Okay, you think these are going to work, and you start building. How do you like, navigate like that first edition of your product, and then where do you take it after that?
Yeah, so I mean, I tend to err on the side of just build as little as you can, just because you don't know what the market will say it actually wants, right? So I'm in that school of thought where it's just build something and start sharing it with people as kind of early as you can. I mean, because ultimately it's the market that will tell you if you built the right thing or not. So yeah, so that's the first thing I try and do is like, what's the least that I can build in terms of features and functionality, all that kind of stuff. In terms of what I build, I tend to build things as I think the user would flow through the application. So just think about what the user experience is. You know, user's going to come to the homepage, they have a homepage. User has to sign up, has to log in. So you kind of build all of that stuff out if that's something that needs to happen. And then you just start thinking about, okay, well, if they're going to interact with this application, what are the steps that they have to do? So like, for example, with Q, we had two different parts. We had two different user paths. Right? We had this sort of idea of kind of experts who would submit their links and things like that. So we had a user flow. So I built that user flow in terms of a sort of expert would be invited into the platform. They would sign up, and then we built like a workflow where they could see the links that they submitted in the past, that they could add new links, and sort of like, so we just kind of built the flow like how an expert would kind of work through the application. And then we did the same for just how is, somebody who wants to have more content for their social media, they signed up, they selected the categories that they were interested in, and then they kind of saw some of the sample posts that were in those categories. And then we built the sort of scripts that would automatically take the content from the categories that they selected and then kind of post them out onto their social media as well. So I think it just kind of makes you it makes you think about how the user is going to see the thing that you're working on. So I think it's a really helpful way to kind of build things just like how a normal user would kind of see your application as well, rather than trying to build from back to front and all that kind of stuff. I like to think about things as the user is flowing through as well. So yeah, I think that to me has always been the sort of easy way.
Yeah, that's interesting. When would you start sharing? There's obviously like I don't know how like new it is, but there's obviously like a big like build in public movement, I think we call it, where everyone's just like building through ideas and working through problems like completely openly, getting feedback from people all the time, pretty consistently. Is that something you do? And if not, how soon would you share a new product or project that you're working on?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It depends a little bit on how long you think it's going to take you to build the thing that you want.
Okay.
There's been some projects where it's like, it's really, the building of the product isn't really that interesting, right? Like it's like if you're building a blog or something like that, then the building of the thing isn't the interesting thing. And so sharing the fact that you're going to build a blog isn't really too interesting, right? So so if it's something that isn't going to take a long time to build, and there's really not anything too interesting about what you're actually building itself, then I don't think there's much point in kind of sharing as you're working. Now, alternatively, even something like Q, as we were working on that, I don't know that we were really sharing too much about it. We were sharing privately about that with some people that we knew. We weren't really sharing it publicly, kind of at the time. But that one, because it was just going to take longer, because we also had to get people interested in it. We needed experts to kind of submit their stuff. So we kind of needed to show them what we were working on and kind of how we were thinking that things would work. And we needed people interested to actually receive the content. So we kind of needed to build the marketplace up. We needed to kind of build interest up. Made sense to kind of share that sooner, even though it wasn't fully working, even though we hadn't really fleshed through the whole idea from end to end yet. They actually helped us to kind of refine the ideas as well. Like, as we shared what we were thinking and kind of what we were planning to do, we got input and said, well, maybe you want to rethink things, or maybe these are the things that you also do want to think about that you haven't considered already as well. So if having that early feedback is really important, and it's gonna, and it could shape the future of what the application looks like, then yeah, absolutely share as kind of early as you can, even if it's not a functional product, even if you just got like wireframes or screenshots and things that you're working on, just to kind of show people kind of what you're thinking about, even though it might not actually be, might not be 100% working yet either. Got it.
Nice. So I've got one final question. Well, we've got 8 minutes left before we wrap up. Whiz through that time. If there's any more questions you've got for Mubs, pop them in the chat, and then we'll ask them at the end before we wrap up. But Mubs, I had just one more question around just like the no code space in general. Obviously, you've been seeing this like firsthand. It's developed from like NoCode now to Makerpad, and you've seen the kind of trend go upwards. What are your thoughts on it in general at the moment, both from like a product and community perspective?
Yeah, I mean, product, I think, is just, things are getting better and better every week, every month. Things are improving in terms of both in terms of what the no-code tools are able to do, but also how much easier they're becoming to kind of do those things as well. So I think that's really important. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, no code has existed for a long time, but it was, it's very restrictive in terms of what you could do. And I think the sort of new tools that are coming out there are kind of opening up things that you can do a lot more. And it's kind of interesting to see, because I always like to think about no code is, you still have to think like a programmer, but you don't have to be a programmer in that sense. So I think it's good, because I think it kind of exposes people to the sort of skill set and the mindset that is needed to be a programmer, without necessarily having to learn all of the skills that's kind of associated with it. That then does open up the door. I think more people do learn to code because they've experimented with these tools and they're like, I've taken them as far as I can go, and I want to do the sort of next thing, and do want to kind of learn more and kind of expand more as well. So I think that's really interesting aspect of that. Overall, I think it's fantastic, because I think it just removes a lot of the sort of stumbling blocks or the roadblocks that people have, because it's like, well, I can't find a back-end dev, I can't find a front-end developer, so I can't move my idea forward anymore. I think now you've got this whole stable of tools that you can use now to say, I've got an idea. It may not be the perfect solution if it was custom coded and all that kind of fun stuff, but I can still experiment with my idea. I can see if the market thinks it's a good idea, and I can do it on my own. And I think that's really awesome.
Got it. Nice. Cleve had a question. Said Stack Overflow versus TopTal, Upwork, etc. Where's the hot place to find talented coders?
I don't think they have the same, end goals of things like that. I mean, Stack Overflow is, if you're stuck on a specific problem, I think Stack Overflow is an awesome place to go and see if other people have had the same problem, sort of all that kind of stuff, and see if you might find a solution as well. I haven't done any hiring in a long time, so I don't know in terms of what's the best place to go, find people to work on projects and kind of things like that. Normally I find you want to find people with the same kind of mentality that you do, rather than a specific skill set, something like that. So find the community that is the best in terms of the way that you want to work and the kind of problems that you want to work on as well. Like Indie Hackers, for example, is an awesome place to go to find people who are doing that side hustle, who are trying to solve things in weekends and evenings. And they may not be the best coders out there, but it's going to be hard to get the best coders, to kind of work on a side hustle if they're not interested in kind of doing that thing. So I think to me, it's more about finding people who fit with you in terms of the way that you want to work.
Got it. Good answer. Question from Firat. Content aggregation is king for a while, but easy to get copied. We should invent some different styles. What should that be? Or what layer could we add on top of content aggregation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with content aggregation because it's kind of moved, right? Like there used to be like all of these like startup stash and, all of that slew of like content aggregation in terms of people finding links and putting them together. And it seems like that's moved now from like things like that. So there's like a Substack for everything now, right? There's like weekly newsletter where, people will find links and, find articles and things and put them into a newsletter, and then you kind of email them out every, kind of once a week and kind of things like that. So I think content curation will always be king, just because the amount of content that's getting produced continues to increase every day, every week, every month. And so finding a way to kind of filter that out, I think will kind of always be important. And I think with content, I think it's just trying to stake your place, like try and find a niche that somebody hasn't really kind of looked at in the past, because it's not something that people have been interested in. But if it's something that you're interested in, then you just start. Like I think first mover advantage is huge in content curation, because if you can lay your if you can stake your claim on it earlier, I think it's really helpful there. And obviously, it's one of those things where it's like the more you do it, the better you get at it too. And so the sooner you start curating stuff in that niche, the more you'll find really good stuff in that niche. And it's going to be harder for people to kind of yes, they will copy you, but really they're not going to get close to you just because you've been doing it for so long and have that experience as well. So I think with that kind of stuff, you're going to have to do it for a while without a huge audience, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think if you look back and see who was doing really good at content curation, they were doing that content curation long before that niche was really long before that niche was really hot. Like just like with Penn, he was doing the NoCode content curation and aggregation stuff long before it was really mm-hmm. popular. And now that it's become a popular thing, yeah, he's in the middle of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. The one thing, we are banging on the hour mark. So I think one thing that stood out from the way you talked about actually building products, which might be cool to see from people who are in the challenge, is actually just getting that first user flow built and actually like sharing it. So I know everyone should be in the Circle community channel. If you are building your product and you do know what that first user flow looks like, maybe it's like a sign up page through to like a newsletter, or maybe it's like the first core function of an app you're building with search. We'd love to see it. So if you're at that stage now, get that shared in the Makerpad challenge channel, and we'll pick that up and I'll make sure I get it to Mubs, and we'll take a look at it, and then maybe we can reference a few of them at the end of the week as well. That'd be awesome to see. Anything else you want to add, Mubs?
Yeah, I mean, the one other thing I tell people, and people who are trying to get started in this thing, is it's okay if things don't work, right? Because I think again, people have this idea that they're gonna start their first product and they're gonna build it, and it's all gonna work perfectly, and things things are not gonna there's gonna be no problems, no issues along the way. Everything's gonna work perfectly. That's not how software gets built, people. There's even me with 20 years on experience with this stuff. You're always hitting problems that you never hit before. You're always finding errors and things that you're working with libraries and SDKs and kind of all these things that there's people don't try and make things hard, but things are just hard. But it's okay that if things are hard. If things were easy, then it wouldn't really be that much fun. But so yeah,
Absolutely.
just because you hit like a problem where things aren't quite working the way that you're expecting to, things, it's okay to just kind of step back and say, I'm going to take a break for this evening. I'm just not going to work on it because this is just blowing my mind. But that's okay, right? Like you don't have to like solve every problem the minute that you hit it either. So yeah, so just keep plugging away, even if you hit those issues. And I think in the long run, it's well worth it.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good place to wrap up. Thanks, Mubs, for taking the time out of your undoubtedly incredibly busy day, and to everybody for coming and listening to us chat for an hour. Some great questions, it's good topics to dive into. So, yeah, I appreciate everyone stopping by and look forward to seeing what you're all going to be submitting for the challenge. Make sure you post some updates in the challenge channel, and we'll pick them up and take a peek. But yeah, thanks again, Mubs. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks all.
See you later. Bye.